So Pride in Leadership exists to elevate, connect and support LGBT leaders across all sectors, across all shapes and sizes of organisation, and aspiring leaders as well, because we want to obviously help everybody else get up the ladder and achieve their potential. The way that we do this is we focus on, first of all, events. So we've got a few events coming up that you might be interested in. I've written them down so I don't forget. So one of our other sponsors, Crow, is putting on an event for us at Social Refuge, and it's business support workshops. So it's Crow, who are specialist accountants. They're actually going to deliver a workshop that helps small and medium-sized businesses with all of those things to do with business that are really important and you can't get wrong, but you don't really normally put the time into learning about them. So that's going to be really good. They're also putting on lunch at Social Refuge, and they're putting on booze as well. So it's going to be a very nice couple of networking events, and they're on the 24th of June and the 1st of July. So please come along to those. We've got some online events for you in September, an EDI leadership event with Steve Saleh, and an event on LGBTQ plus disability with Toby, and that's in October. Toby's going to speak to you later as well, so you'll know him by the time that comes round. And then we've got our annual conference on the 6th of November. Last year we had 100 seats for that at Social Refuge, and we sold out 6 weeks before the event, which buggered my marketing. I couldn't do any promotion or all the things that I was supposed to do to keep promoting it because there were no tickets left. So please book your tickets. I've got 200 seats this year, so we might sell out, but make sure that you get your ticket. We've also got an online mentoring platform as well, so we offer mentoring for free. We provide the platform. I always say it's a bit like Tinder, although I don't know why I say that because I've never used Tinder, but we put the platform on, the mentors and the mentees come in, and then we ask them to match themselves. So please have a look at that, and please don't just put yourself on, you know, put yourself forward and make sure you're doing that connection bit as well. And then the last thing I want to tell you about is this report that we're all here to talk about. So it started with a survey. Sounds a bit like a nice song, doesn't it? Not really. It started with a survey that we kicked off in around June time last year. I thought if we can just get to about 150, 200 people over however many months that might take, then that would be quite a reasonable number. Anyway, we got to 200 in about a week. So Matt and I had a conversation. We said, well, this is just so easy to find all these gays everywhere. Let's set a target of 1,000. And anyway, we were beating our heads off the wall by the end of it, trying to get the last 17 or so people to fill it in. And we achieved it the night before the annual conference last year, which was November time. And then at the annual conference, we did get another 17 people who filled it in. So that was kind of good and annoying, because if the annual conference had been 2 weeks earlier, it would have been less stressful. But yeah, we've had these amazing people telling us their stories of work from across the ages, their experiences in recruitment, their experiences in the office, how people have amazing policies but then don't follow through on them, all of this. And we pulled out their quotes. We didn't just want to give you numbers, we wanted to pull out the quotes as well so that we're telling real people's stories. And so, let me just see if I've remembered everything. Yes, so that drafting started in January. Matt and I went back and forth, didn't we? 1 million times, I would say, probably around. And we sent it to Jodie, who's our designer, who you're going to hear from tonight. And she turned it from this ghastly Word document into something that's, I think, really quite beautiful. So we're going to hear from Jodie, and she's going to tell us more about that. But Matt is actually going to talk to us now about the report. You've asked me to mention that it's a bit of a trigger warning. You've all come to an event that's about LGBT experiences in the workplace, so please don't expect kittens and rainbows. There are a few mentions of things that are impolite, bad experiences, bad language, that kind of stuff. So please be aware. If you need to step away, we understand that.
So yeah, as Claire said, we got 1,017 responses to the report. However, you'll see here on this slide, there's only 1,015. And the reason for that is when we read through all of the findings, we found that 2 cisgendered heterosexuals had filled it in and said that everything is fine. So we actually removed them, and we thought we'll go with the 1,015. But it was very sweet of them anyway. A quick tour of the kind of demography of the report. I appreciate some of this might be a bit small if you're at the back, but I'll go through it. We had a pretty good kind of gender split. So 39% female, 48% male, 12% non-binary or trans, and 3% other. We had a good representation there. We did skew a little bit kind of later in career, a little bit kind of older. So that's worth kind of noting. Some of the experiences that people talk about will kind of go back into time a little bit further. So around half of our respondents were kind of mid-level in the organisation. So we're overrepresented at people at the kind of top of organisations, which for our research was actually quite good because these are people that have experienced, pretty much the full range of their kind of career progression. So we're well placed to comment on that. Around 30% of our respondents consider themselves to have a disability. And we had, the full kind of rainbow of sexuality, as you might expect. We were sadly underrepresented in terms of people of colour and other groups. We got a reasonably good showing compared to kind of other research, but we've still got kind of more to do there. I think it's fair to say. So more than the stats, though, what really kind of came out for us were the stories. They kind of leapt off the virtual page, if you like. There were stories here that were kind of like at once horrifying and again kind of utterly sort of expected and kind of utterly predictable, and that kind of weird juxtaposition was kind of the kind of hallmark of kind of going through this work. Our key findings were that being LGBTQ+ influences people's career choices quite dramatically. So around 56% of our respondents said that being LGBTQ+ has influenced their choice of career. I'm just going to say queer. Is that all right? Because I'm going to say this acronym about 27 times in 8 minutes. So being queer influences where you live. So this was quite a surprising one. That actually, a huge proportion of our respondents said that being queer influenced where they live either significantly or entirely. And 20% there said moderately. So more people than not said that there was an influence on where they live because of their sexuality or their gender identity. Being queer influences where you work. So this is the proportion of people that have not applied for or turned down a role because it would have required a move to a location that they considered might be less queer friendly. So understandably, people don't want to do that. And being queer influences where you travel. So here we had the proportion of people that face difficulties related to being queer whilst travelling for work purposes. So you can see that this orange segment here, just over 1 in 5 occasionally, and then 2% there frequently. So almost 1 in 4 people experiencing that difficulty. It influences your educational experience. So around 34%, around 1 in 3 of our respondents said that being queer had negatively affected their educational achievement or attainment. And as I said, more than that, it was really the kind of stories that illustrated that right through, from all of those choices about where to live, your experience in education, but also crucially into the workplace. And that's really where we kind of did a deep dive with the report. So 85% of our respondents experienced at least one significant barrier in their career due to being queer. These barriers were really numerous actually, and it wasn't just this kind of same barrier that kept cropping up. But to give you a bit of a countdown of the top ones, a lack of LGBTQ+ representation in leadership positions, so a lack of role models, was the most common. Half of our respondents said that they'd faced an uncomfortable or actively hostile work environment. An inadequate level of support from HR or management for LGBTQ+ issues, 42%. Discrimination or bias in promotion or assignment opportunities, 27%. Concerns when travelling for work, as I said before, around 1 in 5. 15% verbally or physically attacked at work, 15%. 15% said none of the above, none of those barriers faced. And 6% gave us other barriers. And we had an enormous long list of various kind of particular barriers that they faced. Around 76% of people said that they could identify no visible role model at any point in their career from a work perspective. So that's something that we're really passionate about at Pride in Leadership, trying to change, and we're going to see a bunch of role models tonight. Coming out, around 32% of our respondents have never come out to their customers or their clients. So, of course, coming out is something we do all the time, right? You know, you might have done it 7 times today already. Our survey, you know, asked around the kind of first time around coming out. So, but we did break it down in terms of when you came out to your friends, your family, to your colleagues, and to clients or people external to the business. And we found that it was kind of coming out to clients or externals where really there was the most barrier. Sometimes because of kind of worries and kind of discomforts. What if this affects performance? What if customers no longer work with us because of this, and then I get blamed for that? And sometimes because of an active prohibition against that from their employer. So that's really where, you know, there's work to do at all levels, but that's where there's a lot more work to do. It's probably no surprise, sadly, that things are even shitter for trans people, which was a depressing but predictable finding from our work. So you recall before I said 85% on average across everybody in the group, which included trans people, have faced barriers at work. 95% of trans respondents reported experiencing workplace barriers. And you can see here that it's not just that every barrier is more, that is the case, but not consistently, not uniformly. So actually, inadequate HR support, 61% of trans and non-binary people said that they had that versus just 37% of cis LGBT people. And trans people were much more likely to, trans and non-binary people were much more likely to experience an uncomfortable or hostile work environment, massively more likely. So those are the 2 particular barriers that are overrepresented for trans people right now. All of this survey was done before the Supreme Court ruling as well. I think that's important kind of context. So yeah, and we saw lots of kind of anecdotal evidence of these barriers as well, including this, which I think sums up, you know, various stories that we received, that when somebody removed their pronouns from their CV, they started getting calls to job interviews that they didn't seem to be getting before. Barriers are greater for those with intersectional identities. So you can see a quote here, I think being black and born female has had more effect than being queer. So intersectionality, you know, leapt off the page as something being absolutely an absolutely key kind of correlation in terms of the barriers that you will face. Barriers are greater across all those kind of different intersectional groups. This is an example here. Responders that consider themselves to have a disability, again, overrepresented in terms of uncomfortable or hostile work environment and inadequate support from HR. So that's a bit of a theme across the intersectional identities. We didn't want to make this an entire like doom fest. It's kind of difficult not to do that with the nature of the research, but we did devote a significant amount of the forum to inquire about, well, you know, what's been good? What's the kind of silver lining, if you like, of some of these experiences? So 7% felt that being queer had a positive effect on their careers, which is a small but, you know, at least significant number. You were more likely to be in this group the younger you were, pretty much. And so what kind of positive impacts, what were those silver linings? Well, we have kind of skills and what I would say kind of coping strategies emerging from some of those experiences that people reported having that were very useful to them in their careers. So enhanced empathy and interpersonal skills, enhanced ability to think creatively and challenge norms, the improved judgment of character and ability to build better networks, and stronger networks within queer professional communities. So the gay mafia, to use a colloquialism, which is what we're basically trying to build tonight. And somebody says, in fact, that the gay mafia is a thing. We all overwork, so if you want something, you are never more than a few phone calls or connections away from someone who can help. The queers always seem willing to help each other, in my experience. And that kind of came across time and time again. That actually one of the key ways that we can work together to overcome or at least offset some of these barriers, many of which are imposed upon us by systems that are outside of our control. No amount of contorting ourselves to try and fit those norms is going to help us to overcome these barriers. But actually there are ways that we can mitigate some of them. And one of the key ways that we can do that is actually to network with each other, connect and help each other out. So I'm delighted that you're here today to do just that. If you want to read all of those 90-odd pages of the report, there's a lot more in there, then check out our website, prideinleadership.co.uk. You will find, you'll find a downloadable version of the report there and a few key stats. Thank you.
I was going to get to sit down.
Jodie made this all beautiful, so please give her another round of applause.
So, why did I want to design this report? Opportunities like this don't come along too often. And actually to have this level of data to sort of play with and to represent felt really important. It felt quite an honour to be able to do that. Naively, I think when I agreed to do this, I assumed it would be like 20 pages. Maybe not the sort of, was it 96 in the end or something? But actually the substance was the vital thing. It was what, we haven't seen this before basically. This is the first of its kind thing. But that presents challenges with a design. Most of us, I'm sure in our corporate lives, we've all received documents that are 96 pages long and glaze our eyes over after 2 pages. We wanted this to make an impact. It needed to be immediate. So actually the design was really important and we needed to get that substance in there. But a lot of us, when we look through documents like this, we open it up, we have a flick through, we look at key things, and then we decide we're going to go back and read the whole thing. So impact was important, colour was important. It's a queer document, it needs to be very colourful. I mean, one of those stats to really shine out. We wanted to be able to take things that, like Matt has said in his previous talk, from the report and easily be able to put those into things like social media and report decks. And also, we talked a lot about intersectionality. That's really important, and we need to practice what we preach. And we looked at several ways of kind of representing the visuals of these reports. We quite early on decided that we wanted to go with illustration rather than photography. Actually, when we have photography, the second you stick a human face on something, it becomes a person, a thing that in some way is different to us, minor, large. Whereas actually with illustration, it's a bit more sort of abstract, but it's still very human. It can still represent personality, but it actually enabled us to be a lot more diverse in what we were showing, how we were showing it. And it did add an element of playfulness to what is, at times, quite a heavy read.
How dare you?
But it gave us flexibility as well, basically. And actually, we wanted this to be ownable as well. Pride and Leadership's done amazing work doing this. So actually, when this is shared out into the world, we wanted it to be immediately identifiable as a Pride and Leadership thing because you've put the work in. And actually, you have the authority to talk about this now in a way that is really important. And actually, we wanted everything to be able to come back to this document so people could take these findings and hopefully implement them across their sectors as well. Yeah, the 1,030, whatever, people really buggered up our percentages for pie charts and graphs, but we tried to work. There was a bit of back and forth, rounding up and rounding down numbers so people didn't look like we fiddled our maths. But yeah, it's landed really well. It's had a really good reception, and essentially we want to make these things accessible to people, and we want them to have an impact, and communication is really important in doing that. And actually we wanted something that, despite the heaviness of a lot of the reports, we wanted it to feel sort of positive and colourful, and because a lot of the time the issues in the report are from other people. Our community is strong, it's thriving, it's inspirational. We see all of those things, we see that in the findings. We have a lot of the research as well. So actually we wanted that to come across as actually a report to be proud of our community rather than it sort of feeling very set upon. So yeah.
My name is Judy Macaulay. I'm British Nigerian, and I'm an activist. I'm also an ordained minister, so if you forget everything that I say tonight, you might want to remember the happy, holy homosexual. That's not part of the report. And House of Rainbow, I started an organization called House of Rainbow. The clue is in the rainbow. And it started in Nigeria in 2006, the very year the Nigerian government introduced the anti-gay bill. So, we had a very difficult backdrop, in setting up our organization. And of course, House of Rainbow has grown. The services are there, but we still have a lot of difficulties as well supporting our people. There's so many things that we do, the pastoral care, the advocacy, the education and training. And we did a project recently, which was Rainbow Shield. And it's actually to hear from black LGBT people that have been trafficked on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. So there are so many things that are going on. And of course, there's also a whole community of people that are seeking asylum as well. That's a lot of work. And I'm actually going to jump straight in to talk about this incredible report. Additional barriers facing black LGBT communities. And I'll stay with my note this time. Black LGBT individuals in the UK face compounded barriers in career development, shaped not only by the sexual orientation or gender identity, but also by race, culture, religion, and immigration status. So these intersecting identities intensify marginalization and affect confidence, educational outcomes, and career advancements. And a few examples. So we look at intersectionality and compounded barriers. The report highlighted that LGBT professionals from ethnic minority backgrounds, including black communities, encounter higher rates of discrimination and exclusion. These individuals often face dual biases, racism, and queerphobia. You get that, yeah? Cultural and religious pressure. I think I was talking to my friend earlier on, about this as well, and Troy. About cultural and religious pressure. There's cultural and religious conversations within some black and faith-based communities can create intense internal conflicts. So just imagine during Ramadan or even during Christmas, if you're a queer person, it's really difficult for you to engage. I remember working in the civil service years ago, and the only way I can join the Christian group is when I became the poet laureate of the community. So I was writing poems for every meeting. And so dropping dropping queer issues sometimes in the narratives until they kick me out. Well, another point with the report that's very important is immigration and legal insecurity. So LGBT migrants, especially those seeking asylum or on temporary visa, often feel unsafe being open about their identity. There is fear of deportation, lack of legal protection, and vulnerability to exploitation, especially in workplaces where rights are not clearly upheld and enforced. And we saw that with a lot of corporate withdrawing from our Pride activities, and that is quite painful to see. Lack of representation and role models. I like the fact that the report highlighted, and Matt, thank you, and Claire, thank you again. A significant 70% of respondents cited the lack of LGBT role models in leadership. And that is why it's important for black and brown people to be in the spaces that you created for us, Claire. So this figure is likely higher among black LGBT professionals who are even less visible in top positions. Someone gave me a really big book recently. It's called Corporate Queers. I don't know if everyone's come across it. Oh my God, I should have brought it with me. It's got photographs of, LGBT people within corporate spaces. And I could literally count on one hand how many black and brown people were in that collection. So you can see that we still have a long way to go. So solutions and recommendations. The report calls for targeted action, increasing black LGBT representation, offering culturally competent support services, strengthening legal protection for migrants, and embedding anti-racist and inclusive policy within LGBT leadership program. I'm doing some work, I would say which organization, I'm doing some work currently at the moment. And when I asked the leadership of this organization if they have any black or brown person in the management team or the trustee, it was 0. And so often, you see communities that say that, we're diverse, but then again, you're struggling to see black and brown people in those spaces. These are the things that we're talking about. And just a couple more points. I'll say this, like 4 organizations. So if you're going back to your organizations, I'm asking you to go beyond performative allyship. It's important to be intentional. Create safe spaces and networks for queer people of color, especially your staff. They need those spaces, especially if they're going to be more productive. Support inclusive travel policies as well. So if people are going to come with a significant other, make sure that they are safe to do so. So for policymakers, I don't know if there are any in the room, but I've got two things for you. Strengthen employment protections, and of course, include LGBT data in ethnicity and pay gap reporting. And to the LGBT community that I know are largely present here today, find and be role models. Encourage Black LGBT leaders to share their stories and mentor others. So there's opportunity to provide mentorship. And finally, but not the least, challenge cultural and religious stigma from within. Engage our community in educating them and advocating for them, especially within faith-based and within our countries, within our communities, and also in the diaspora community, to create affirming spaces for LGBT people of color. Thank you so much.
So there was a line in the report that really stood out for me, and it said that there's always room for pride, but there's never room for my access needs. And it was just it was a line in the report that really stood out to me and got me thinking about what's my experience like growing up as a queer disabled person. Now, the thing is, I didn't come out till quite late in life. I came out when I was 29 years old. I'm now in my 40s. I don't know if I should admit that or not. But I always felt that growing up, I was different to the kids at school because I was born with my disability. I've got a rare genetic neuromuscular condition, and disability has always been the focus of my experience. I grew up having to go to hospital appointments. I've had life-saving back surgery. And my sexuality has always been kind of on the back burner, because I think we grow up in a society where disabled people are largely seen as asexual human beings, people that don't have romantic or any sexual desires. And so my sexuality was always kind of put on the back burner. I grew up and nobody really asked me what my kind of aspirations were in terms of chosen life partners or anything like that. And I suppose the focus was always on medical interventions or access requirements and things like that. But also my sexuality was something that I could very easily hide from the rest of the world, because my disability was always there in the foreground. Whereas my sexuality, I could kind of switch it on and off if I wanted to. I could easily hide it. Whereas my physical disability was something that I just cannot hide. I can't not use my powered wheelchair, or I can't not request access into a building. So I came out quite late in life. I was 29 years old. I actually, to cut a long story short, I got pneumonia in 2010. I spent 2 months in a coma in intensive care. And then when I came round, I was already undergoing therapy. And I went back into my therapist's office, and she said, well, that was a bit of an experience, wasn't it? And I said, yeah, that was quite an experience, because they were, it was a bit touch and go as to whether I would make it through. And she said, right, let's get down to business. What do you want to talk about? I said, well, I think I'm gay. She's like, right then, okay. Okay, let's dive into the deep end, shall we? So I processed that, and I went through this kind of journey of really coming to terms with my sexuality and getting really comfortable with now identifying as a gay man as well as somebody who's disabled. But I was really fortunate in that at the time I was working at the BBC, which I felt was a very inclusive environment for me to be working in. So there were lots of gay role models in the organisation that I could look up to. There were also lots of disabled role models that I could look up to. But there were actually no, to my memory, or very few, disabled gay role models that I could look up to, that intersectionality. And so intersectionality was not something that I'd ever really considered. Looking back through my kind of formative years, it's something that I've always experienced, but it's not something I could ever put my finger on or kind of put words to. And it wasn't until I started working in the field of diversity and inclusion in after 2010 at the BBC, that I really started to think about what intersectionality was and how my experience growing up as a queer disabled person might be different to, say, somebody who's a not queer disabled person. So when I think about my experiences being a gay disabled person, I think about things like, well, when I started sort of getting on the dating scene, if you like, I lived in London at the time. I moved to Manchester 4 years ago. Very few bars in Soho are wheelchair accessible. Very few bars in Canal Street are actually wheelchair accessible. So what that's telling you is, I think there's one, Via is pretty okay. But it's like, what that's telling you is that if you're a wheelchair user, if you have a physical disability, the gayborhood, somewhere where you're supposed to feel safe and comfortable and welcome, is not actually safe, comfortable or welcoming to you as somebody who's got a physical disability. When you go on the apps and you try to meet people, and people say to you, oh, I could never date somebody in a wheelchair, you know, that's telling you that, hang on a minute, you know, I've got to work really hard to find my life partner or significant other. So all of these experiences sort of come through. But there is a plus side because, you know, there's that phrase, if you can't see, you can't become what you can't see. When I worked at the BBC, I felt like I could become what I could see because there were those disabled and queer role models that I could really look up to. And then I left the BBC and I went to work in the city for a big accountancy firm, and there were no disabled. So when I first joined the company, they said, what are your aspirations? And I said, I'm going to become partner in 12 months. And they were like, yeah, right. But the thing is, when I looked up at that partnership level, there were no visibly disabled people, and there were really no out queer disabled people either. And I didn't actually stay working in that company for very long. And I think there is something around the culture of the company because I couldn't see myself at the top of the company. So maybe I did struggle to get to the top of the business. But there is something, but my final thought really is about the queer mafia, right? Because actually, when I did come out and when I was a lot more open about being disabled and gay, that opened up a huge community for me to tap into. I was able to join the Pride Network at the BBC, and I was able to tap into the gay mafia. And then when I set up my own consultancy 6 years ago, my first client, who is still a client now, is a gay chief people officer in a publishing company. And if I wasn't open about my sexuality, he wouldn't have become my first customer. And I wouldn't have been able to grow and develop my business to where it is today. So that's my thoughts. In terms of kind of final thoughts, if we think about that line from the report, there's always room for pride, but not room for my accessibility. If you are organising any LGBT events in your organisation, please do consider how you're making your events accessible for disabled people, because there are queer disabled people who really need to come to your events and be part of your community. So try to dismantle and remove as many barriers as possible so that they can join you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. I think Claire's quite right in saying we're not doing a good enough job. I think we've always been up there with car salespeople and estate agents as the worst of the worst. And we need to do better, basically. We need to be braver and bolder. So a bit of a reality check, I guess, in terms of, I think, probably truths that lots of us have known for ages, like it's just not good enough. But now we've got the data to show it. So I've picked a couple of quotes out that Matt had already shared on the screen, so I'm going to save Claire some time with that. But these experiences are not out of the ordinary, they're not outliers. Sort of 93% of respondents believed that bias had impacted hiring decisions. 77% were kind of pretty sure, and 16% were absolutely positive. And I guess a massive part of that is this culture fit issue that we hear loads from clients, like this person's just not a good fit. And I think the big thing for us is to be interrogating, like, what do you actually mean by that? What does that mean? So as recruiters, hiring managers, agency leaders, or everybody together, we can either be gatekeepers, I think, or door openers. And that's what I would like to role model, be responsible for, and kind of champion. So when I looked at the report, there were sort of 3 areas that I saw coming through. Internal stuff like culture. I love the culture eats strategy policy, everything else for breakfast. And I think that's really true. And then there's the kind of outward communication stuff and also the data. So just thinking a little bit about this culture fit piece. What does culture fit actually mean? It means, do you look like us, do you sound like us, and do you act like us? And I guess if you've got a cis, white, able-bodied workforce, then it's just not going to cut it. So we try and talk to clients a lot about culture add, and we do that before we even get to any of the recruitment stuff. And we really try and work with clients to say, what don't you have in your team? So things like who's missing, what voices don't we hear, what lived experience might add value to your team, and really trying to open up that conversation about business and ethical need for diversity. So we talk to clients about kind of skills, experiences, behaviours, approaches, what don't you have in your team, and then we try and use that in the external communications that are going out. So then looking at things like job descriptions, person specifications, adverts and application instructions. There's loads of kind of quick wins with some of this stuff by just using language checkers and gender checkers and things like that. And that's not just in your recruitment process, that needs to feed in across the whole organisation. And then the final bit, I guess the foundation of it all, which this survey really speaks to, is data. Like, we get loads of well-meaning and well-intentioned clients from charity sector coming to us saying, we want more diverse talent pools, we want things to be better. And we say, right, well, what's your starting point? How diverse are you? We don't know. We've never done any data surveys. And we can work with that. That is, it's not ideal, it's not okay, but that's where we're at. So we need to be working with clients like that are showing an interest, that want to be better. And there's just some really quick and easy ways to do that, like this really simple survey monkeys that you can send out to people just to find out, like, what does your team actually not visibly look like? What is the representation in your team? So I think the data is massively important, and that's why this is exactly what this survey shows. And I think recruitment agencies, hiring managers, all of us together need to be better at interrogating that data. Last little point, I promise, Claire. Leading with lived experience, leading with and through lived experience. Like, the best thing that we've done at Charity People is to pay some lived experience advisors to sit on our EDI committee. So we ask a lot of the people in our organisation that have diverse characteristics and markers. There's a real potential there with burnout risk. So we asked some candidates and clients to see if they wanted to come and sit on our EDI committee as paid, in a paid capacity, to offer us advice, and they spot so many of our blind spots. They see things we don't see from in the weeds, and I'm really pleased to say so we've had a chair for 3.5 years. The new one that's just starting is queer and a person of colour, and already just in his first meeting he's seeing things that we're like, God, we should be better, and we will be better. And absolute final thing, we need to be partnering with organisations like Pride in Leadership. This is really, I hope, a mutual beneficial relationship that we've got. We get access to networks, we're able to share our roles with the community, and also hopefully give some stuff back as well. Thank you.
So it's really good to be here. The report was really interesting, and just standing here and listening to everything, and just really loads of things going through my mind. And So I have a company called Alternative Care Services, and we are the first social care company with an LGBT focus. And we started in 2019. So I used to live in New York, and a friend of mine was HIV positive and needed social care. And someone turned up and tried to wash him with a mop. And so I was going to start the company there, because I realised that there's a whole load of stigma, etc. And then my sister got terminally ill, and so my family asked me to come back home, and I came back home to London and I started it here. And so it's really, for me, it's such an important thing. There's two things that's going to happen. You're either going to die or you're going to get old, so that means that 90% of us are going to need social care. So what does that mean to us? It's extremely important. I'm a trans man, I'm a black trans man, so I have all those intersectionalities, and I understand exactly what it's meant. It's been a struggle to even keep the company alive, because the LGBT community are everywhere. So, people phone us up and they'll call from Cornwall, they'll call from Scotland, they'll call from, all over. Everybody just wants to be able to have dignity in their life. You don't want someone to turn up and... So, example, my sister was dying of cancer, and we were in the hospice, and the vicar, the preacher, whoever she was, she knew my family, and so my sister was on her last legs, and they came in, and I'm not religious, and they decided to pray for me first, because I'm trans, before they prayed for my sister. But the thing about it is that people expect you to accept that, And my poor sister, she was just like, okay, yeah, we'll pray. And I just, I walked out. I got furious and I walked out. But it's that whole idea that you should experience this and you should accept it. So if you're older and you want care, and then you've got pictures of yourself in your past life, and people come in and they start questioning you, how are you going to feel? You just we live our lives and we want ordinary lives, and that ordinary life just means we want to be able to live with dignity, because we all have that right. No one has the right to take that away from us. So that's the reason that I started the company. I think it was extremely important for me about role models. I didn't see any role models. Even in my business now, if I go to a local authority and I say, we specialise in the LGBT community, they say, oh, well, we don't have any gay people. And all of a sudden, your whole company is about being gay, and that's not what it's about. It's about being able to make sure that the care that we provide and support we give people is what they need. Because, being part of the LGBT community it's culture. One of the things I really wanted I have to mention, because this really I think doesn't get spoken about enough. But there's a lot of racism in the LGBT community. So when I see people from the community at the top of their field, it's normally white gay men, and they don't have space for me. What's happened in my career is people will come and they will use me for data, and then they will go off and write it up as if it were their own thing. And so, if we want to talk about building our community, a community is inclusive. We talk about the mafia. A mafia is a family. We don't want to be outside of that family. So I think it's really important that we pull together for each other, because we're all we've got. I used to be, people used to, pride and the gay flag and I am extremely proud of pride, because the alternative for me is shame. And, all throughout my life growing up, I've been made to feel ashamed, and I don't feel that anymore. I stand up for myself, but I've got to say that I am one of the few people that can do that, because I went to university, I'm dyslexic, just to prove everybody wrong. I got 3 degrees, I didn't want 1, I'm an overcompensator. But I don't want to have to do that all of the time. I don't want to be the only person in the room. So it's really important to me. I'm on the Good Law Project. I'm on this board. I'm on everybody's board, and it's important, because if I sit on a board, right? I sit on the board and they want to elect another white man. I jump, no, and I rally all the women and everybody on my side, and we have we get somebody else that we need. And so it's important that we step up, and I've had to upskill myself. I've had to join all kinds of things, and networking and role models, and it's really, really, really important. But I found my courage and my voice by being by being let in by other people, and there was a time when I was on the board of this organization called Spectra, and I come from a background as a black trans person where I've been told I'm crap. And you believe that if you hear it long enough. As a black person, people see my skin color first, and that's universal. If I'm in China, well, China's kind of funny because they just come up and touch you all the time. But, they see, that's what everybody sees, that before they see anything else. They see my skin, then they see my gender, and then if they find out that I'm trans, I came out as trans, I've just put it all over the place because people out me. I'm on the Good Law Project. If you Google me, people have written all kinds of crap. I've had clients that's posted stuff about me. You're an abomination. So I've actually put it out there, but some people, don't want to do that. My allies, I expect the gay community to open up. I expect us in this time to be a force, because when we are a force, people have to take us seriously. As I say, if you're not dead, you're going to get old. And what we want is to live in peace and in pride. We're trying to open our first children's home now for trans children. And then they say, well, prove that there are trans children around that. I'm like, we want people to be safe. It's important for me to feel safe. So yeah, my company's been going for, I don't know how many years now. I've taken a month off. It's my birthday on Sunday, and I've decided to take a month off. And it's the first time I've not had to worry about payroll, and I've not got up in the morning thinking, is the check going to bounce and all of that. But for some reason, we're still here. And more people, what companies, I don't think my company should be the only one. I think every single social care company should be able to look after every single person. And what will make them do that is money. And if we stamp our feet long enough and decide that, I'm not taking this and I'm not putting up with that nonsense, they'll have to take charge. They'll have to listen. So, rambling on here. It's important, we look after young people too. Now we've started looking after young people. I think that's extremely important. I don't have any kind of isms. I put my pronouns out there. I used to be scared of having the rainbow flag in my logo. And I'd always watch for people's reactions, because people go, pronouns and all of that. But now I'm adamant. I'm not going to go away just because you don't want me to be here. It's not going to work like that. So yeah, I know that in Manchester they said they're going to build an LGBT village, and I think that's I think a queer village is going to be, everybody's going to want to come in. That's the thing. Once, we know how to party and look after ourselves, and then you're going to have all the straight people wanting to come in. But, I feel really proud of the fact that we've sort of managed to be here after all these years. We have clients that's just said to me, all I want to do is die with your company. And it's really, really important that people can be themselves. We have 85-year-old men that are singing with the carers, and then their families are watching on the camera. Like, they shouldn't be doing that. They dress up, they put on. And it's really important. You want to be yourself throughout your life, the whole of your life. So, I think social care is really important. We know the state it's in at the moment, but you've got to think about the fact that, they're not paying people. Just tell me when I'm up, because I'll just, and what you want is someone who's going to come in and be able to just understand who you are. Because really being part of the community is cultural. Someone said, what's the difference? But, I'm more connected to a queer person than I am to a black person who's religious. And that's just a fact. Skin color it supersedes. My culture as being queer supersedes my skin color. So things supersede, and so, yeah. Alternative care services, look us up, be an advocate, but, be my ally. You know, I always see, when I come to these things, I always see a lot of white faces, and I just want people to remember that it's really important that, you know, when we're in the room, that you work with us as well to keep us in the room. That intersectionality thing, you know, we shouldn't have any of it, especially in our community. I don't think there's a place for racism in the LGBT community.
I haven't been called young for a long time, so really appreciate that. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I feel really quite honoured to join the Gay Mafia here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. I promise I will keep as short as possible, because I don't know about you, but I am boiling. I grew up in the 80s in Nottingham, and another woo, yay! So I grew up in Nottingham. I actually grew up during the miners' strike. My dad was a miner, and I grew up in a little town, not so little town anymore, called Cotgrave. And in Cotgrave, when I grew up, you either liked football or you were a puff. I chose the latter. I was quite a cute kid, really, wasn't I? I don't know what happened. But basically, I grew up in a period where I didn't have role models. I felt different, I felt dirty, I felt queer, when queer meant odd, out of sorts. And I had quite a bad experience at school. I was picked on, not so much in primary school, but in secondary school. I was fat, and when I walked into the room, you couldn't tell that I was gay at all. I'd mince in and mince out. And so I was a prime target, basically. And it wasn't helped because I actually started secondary school in 1988. And 1988, just out of interest, put your hands up if you've heard of Section 28. Do you know what? That really doesn't surprise me. When I deliver training, I ask people in the training sessions that I deliver, and I work with initial teacher training now, and I work with schools, and the amount of times that I ask that question, and at best, 2 or 3 hands go up. And for me, when I was at school, I wasn't aware of Section 28. All I knew was that actually I was picked on, and aside from anything else, one of the teachers that was in the secondary school kind of exacerbated that. And it made me feel about this big. My dad basically said, keep your head down, do your best at school. And for me, I followed my dad's kind of advice, really. And my dad basically said, get your head down, get yourself a decent qualification, and you'll go far. And I used to line my teddies up. I was a born teacher. I'd line them all up. One of them was called Anthony. You always remember the kids that always got into trouble in your schools. And so one of them was Anthony, and I kept telling Anthony off all the time, and I'd take the register. I always wanted to be a teacher. And effectively, when I started my teaching career in 1999, during Section 28. And I went through university. I had a double life. I often liken myself to Banana Man, because by day I went out and I did my teaching. By night I went out and had 1 or 2 gins and tonics. However, I'm not going to talk to you about Section 28. I'm just going to ask you to look at those words that are on screen, because it's actually that acceptability of homosexuality, that pretended family relationship. It really does belittle the LGBTQ community. And it's all as a result of this lovely book. It's actually a Dutch book, and it was translated and it was found in a library in London. And it was one particular family that started a campaign against that book. Does this sound familiar? Because actually that is exactly what happened in Birmingham with the No Outsiders project, and a lot of books were pulled up because they were gay and they were teaching children to be gay. I'm not entirely sure how you can teach children to be gay, but I must have been at the front of the queue. But thankfully, we've got this amazing report. Now, when I looked at this report, I read it a number of times actually, because I sat down and I was like, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's me. Because I kind of fell into headship by accident. My head teacher, I went into deputy headship by accident. My head teacher then went off ill, so I became acting head. And I actually thought, oh, I could do this. I was still straight for all intents and purposes. And I actually didn't come out to my staff until I gained my first actual headship. And even then, I was very reticent about that coming out process. And hearing the stories tonight, it's made me quite emotional, because for me, stories, they're incredibly powerful things. And it's only by using those collective stories that you can share your story, you can then be representative for our group. And when I worked in primary school, I have since left school leadership. I started my business 2 years ago, and I've written some children's books, which you'll have seen some images on that first slide. And there's also this lovely thing here, and at the end there is a QR code. I'm going to do a shameless plug because I have got books here tonight, but I also go and visit schools across the country. I haven't been into any schools in Manchester. So if any of you have got any schools that you want me to go and do a school author visit, writing workshop, the whole shebang, I am more than happy to do that. But for me, this data really resonates, and there's two key bits of data that kind of stand out. Firstly, it's the people that cited the lack of LGBTQ representatives in leadership. And I'm one of those people that actually didn't stand up and for my sins, I wasn't counted, because as a deputy, I was too frightened to do it. As a head, I then started to kind of stand up and be counted, but at the bottom there, where it says 42% of people who are LGBTQ felt they had a good education and it didn't actually affect them, I was one of those 42% because I kept quiet. I'm going to move on to the last slide just to say, please do get in touch. I love working with kids of all ages, and I do all sorts of talks and things like that. But I just want to say, Claire, you've done an amazing job with the team. Such a brilliant report. I'm going to be sharing it with all of the training groups that I work with, and I'm sure I'll be sharing it for a long time to come.
It's such a privilege to be here and to be your final speaker. I'll be quick because no one needs a TED talk at this time of night, and I know that I'm in between the pop and the crisp, and I've even written things down because Claire told me to be brief. First of all, tonight's been full of powerful testimonies, and I'd just like to pay homage, I think, to my fellow speakers who've done an awesome job. Can we please just have a round of applause? It kind of gets you here, doesn't it? It really kind of gets you here in terms of just the power, really. I just want to speak briefly about my own experience. I'm going to talk to you about intersectionality around class and sexuality. I didn't know what the word intersectionality meant when I was growing up. I grew up in rural Cheshire. You knew your station. You didn't look up. You used to kind of get dressed for the doctors. Does anybody kind of get dressed up posh for the doctors? A few nods there. And our own local royalty was the landlord and the doctors. I knew I was gay very, very early on. I was always very happy about being married to Katie rather than Michael, who was her twin brother, and I was 9 at the time. So those subtle signs were there very early on. I left home very young. I went to work, I went to go and find my fortune off from rural Cheshire, and I went and I landed in Birkenhead, and I worked in the Quick Save. Does anybody remember the Quick Save? There's some nods there. Yes, the Quick Save. And there I met a youth worker and my life changed. But so looking back, there were lots of sectionalities, but I became a chameleon. My life has been 30 years of working and serving with young people. But I became a bit of a chameleon, skilled, very, very skilled at reading a room. I know that there will be so many of you that can do that. Adjusting how I spoke, what I shared, what I didn't share, lots of nods around the room. I was out from a very, very early age. My family loved me fiercely. I loved them fiercely. We still love each other very much. But I became someone who they just couldn't quite figure out. And I just didn't feel like I fully belonged, really. I worked hard and my career slowly progressed. But like many of us who grew up not really knowing those social cues that come so easily to others, it just felt like I wasn't quite the right fit in work. And to your point, when we talk about organisational fit, I just felt like I wasn't quite the right fit. And I guess the toll of holding yourself, not being yourself in all of those rooms, they take its toll. And I have to say, you know, I stand here before you with the absolute privilege of being a white cis woman, and I understand and the privilege I get of being an ally. But at that time, that cost for me showed up in 4 ways. Firstly, imposter syndrome. I played small. I'm going to be really honest with you. I played really, really small. There wasn't anybody in leadership who sounded like me or who loved like I did. So I played it really safe. I didn't take risks. Instead, I was really grateful for being there. I'm going to come back to grateful again because I was excessively grateful, excessive gratitude. I just want to spend some time on that, really. Appreciation is great, humility is great, but I was excessively grateful for what I would term was breaks that people gave me. Others would term that as hard-won promotions. Excessive gratitude is such a bloody red flag for me. It's insidious. It eats away at your confidence. It eats away at your pride, your self-value. You're there because you've earned your space. You're there because you've earned your rights. You're not there because someone's given you a break. I didn't really get that until I was in my 40s. That leads me to my third reflection, really poor self-advocacy, really poor. I don't think I ever negotiated a salary package, ever. And I'm really ashamed to say that because I just was really glad of getting an opportunity. I never dreamed of saying, actually, I think I'm worth a bit more than that. I just didn't ever think about that. And I think that's one of the unspoken reasons why, when we look at social economic comparisons in pay for highly skilled jobs, you'll see a differentiator in the pay gap. And that's, I think, it's a personal issue, I think it's because many of us just didn't have those negotiation conversations. And all of those things deeply compound, I think, your confidence, or certainly my confidence, to fully show up as an authentic leader and that be that proud gay northern woman. I just didn't feel like what I had to say mattered. And so it wasn't until I was like in my late 40s that I really started to unpack that. The energy spent code switching. Now, I would say I'm really lucky because when I walk into a room, it's not as if people will automatically make, well, they might do, but they won't automatically make a judgment. But ultimately, I feel that code switching is it's really, really hard work, that second guessing whether or not you truly belong in a room. But over time, I think I began to see the difference I could make to younger people. I began to think about the difference I could make to those young people coming through. And I think ultimately, that's why I founded Good Place Co. I've been in the voluntary service for 15 years. I was the chief executive of a national organisation called Young Enterprise for 5 years. But I founded Good Place Co, which is all around supporting charity leaders to look at place-based mobility. And this is why the Pride Leadership Report matters so much, because so many barriers to career progression for our community aren't obvious, particularly the self-guessing and feeling unseen. And that's why visibility matters. In the report, it talks about representation of leaders. And that's why building cultures of real belonging, where people feel that they belong and they matter, makes all the difference. We don't need to work harder to fit in. We need to change the places that we're trying to fit into. And that's where we as a community come into. I'm very proud. So whether you're here and your journey is early on, or whether you're already here, holding the door, or the keys to the room, we need to make sure that we are holding those doors for people as they're coming through, especially those ones who are not in the position to lift their heads or possibly even see themselves as leaders. So I'll leave it there. Here's to the rule writers and the door holders. And once again, a massive, massive thank you to Claire and to Matt for the report.
So yeah, I know it's really bloody warm and there's lots of amazing ice cold drinks and food downstairs, so I won't keep you for much longer, but I just wanted to take a minute just to celebrate something with you actually. So I don't know, did anybody here actually fill in this survey that we've been talking about? It's quite a lot. So you might be curious about like what happened. So we launched the report a little while ago from a press perspective, and therefore we're in a position to actually see, did anybody actually listen? So the first publication that picked up the report, ironically, was The Straits Times, which it couldn't be more perfect, could it? But yeah, I won't bore you with all of the publications, all the details, but the pickup for it has been massively exceeded Claire and my expectations. It hit syndication on Reuters, it hit US News, it was on NBC News in the States. And one of the main reasons that we know that this is out there and it's doing a good thing is not necessarily the acres of coverage that it's getting, but also the fact that the heteros are upsetteros. And we have had so many comments, like over 500 comments. I've got them all in a spreadsheet. I wanted to share with you some of my favorites. So yeah, there's this one. We've got, that, just an aside, I looked into some of the people, I got weirdly obsessed with this, but I looked into some of the people that were making these comments to see what's their quality of life like. Are they happy? Are they kind of cool with who they are? Found this amazing like intersection between vaccine denial, conspiracy theorism, and misogyny with this kind of, I'm not watching adolescents COVID badge. Amazing. We are one step away from a Trump. With somebody that's pissed off with us, which I think is absolutely great. And that guy in particular says, there's a difference. I think we can all collectively be less sexual in public, and especially the workplace. So this is somebody that just doesn't understand the word sexuality. Like next is going to be saying, I don't think we should have advocacy because avocados are not to my taste. And lastly, my favorite, which I think I'm going to get on a t-shirt, just repugnant degenerates. So there we go. All for doing a bit of research. Wild. But yeah, I mean, the thing that I have learned from actually getting slightly unhealthily obsessed by who are these people and are they all AI and what the hell is going on? Is that every single person in this room absolutely outclasses, outshines, and outsmarts all of these people. So thank you very much for coming today. And in the spirit of repugnant degenerism, we have lots of alcohol downstairs, which we're going to be enjoying. And we will also be heading to B-Swing for those of you that are doing the full 9 miles. So Claire will be taking a delegation to B-Swing. But just briefly, just wanted to say a huge thank you to some of our supporters, the phenomenal charity people, NatWest for having us, Crow for sponsoring us, and of course, all of our fantastic speakers that you've heard from today. So could I get a huge round of applause for them, please? And just one final word from me. Do just check out our events on our website. Claire is working so hard to make the conference a success. It's in November. So yeah, do check out the events page on our website. Check out the report. But if you possibly can, do strong arm your employer into buying tickets for our conference. We will massively appreciate it. I will see you all downstairs. Thank you.